Well, welcome. Today is a really big shoe. Welcome everyone. Post World Series, fall is in the air. Um, somebody asked me yesterday why John Belushi, and I was taken aback by it. I'm going like why not John Belushi? Eventually we're going to do John Candy and Eddie Murphy, Chevy Chase, and nobody's really delved into these things. The stories. What we're doing is basically, and I don't even know if anybody's ever done this. These are live, unedited documentaries. Think about that because I don't know if that exists anywhere. I think Eric came up with that. But essentially, what I'm doing is a live, unedited documentary. And people, if you're going to try to compare it to what's online or what's on TV with hundreds of thousands of dollars in editing and people, it might not be appropriate. But that being said, I think these live, unedited documentaries will stand the test of time, and maybe people will copy the format. The Belushi story is a fascinating story, and we're going to get into it in a couple of minutes because it's got tragedy in it and highlights of comedy and success and failure. And it really is an American story and everything that represents. But at this time, based on the forces that are out there, it is the time to like and subscribe to the channel if you like and want to subscribe to the channel, which is really helpful to us and apparently important to YouTube. So you can push the notifications button and push the like button and push the subscribe button at the same time that I drink this cup of coffee, waiting for you to do that. Oh man, this is good. It's nothing like oh, thanks, Diffuse. Can't stay tonight. Got one of those errands to run, but I'm sure it'll be great. Don't be so sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, remember, like, subscribe, notifications. Those three things is all you have to do. Charlie and Tonya and Jeanette and John and Alana and Marianne Williamson, the guru of the new age. The story will unfold as soon as you do that. And that's good. Okay. Thank you for the 5 gifts. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for even watching the show. I don't even know why. What is so fascinating about it? But apparently people dig it. I mean, we're getting close to 10,000 subscribers, which is astounding to me how quickly this has happened. Thank you, Dina, from Seoul, South Korea. She doesn't even look South Korean, but nevertheless, thank you. Push from Seoul. Thank you for your donation. The books are costing me a fortune, by the way. It's just going through the roof. I should go to rehab just for book addiction because there are books that I see and I have to literally have them positively overnight from Amazon. Audio is helping a lot. I'll tell you that much because I can at least hike and jog while listening. But okay, so we have this sponsor, right? And apparently it's working because the guy's happier than a biltong in doo-doo. It's called Biltong USA right here. This got me through the World Series. This is a new one, but this bag is half empty. This is just for the 9th inning alone. I had to go through half a bag of the Angus flavor to make sure that a foreign country did not take the World Series championship from the United States. That was important. I feel bad for them. I really do. They played a hell of a series up there in Toronto. I had no idea they were that good of a team. After they beat the Dodgers in the first game, I thought for sure the Dodgers would be swept. But that's how I operate as a fan. I just use the power of negative thinking. And I am such a pessimist by nature that I assume the worst. And then when the worst doesn't happen, I'm overjoyed. And at one point, I actually pitched a book idea called The Power of Negative Thinking when I was at Lampoon. kind of a parody of the power of positive thinking, as you can imagine. But I actually kind of live by that, because if things go bad and you already expect them to go bad, there's no effect. And if they go good, then you're overjoyed. I'm overjoyed by the Angus flavor, if that is the right word, flavor, of Biltong USA, the king of all biltong, down there in Prairie, Texas, where I'll be going in a couple of weeks for the JFK convention. Not Prairie, but next door to Dallas. Produces this with his family and the kids, and the whole Mishabrucka get together, and they mix these biltongs into some sort of bouillabaisse of meat that's so gourmet, so delicious, that you can put it in anything. I put it in eggs now. I put it in with noodles. I mean, I'm experimenting. Not all of these are successful, but these are some of the flavors. By the way, there's a secret code. If you use, don't tell anybody, because it's just for the show, so we don't want it to get out. But if you use the code Mark G, you get 10% off on all the biltong, which will kind of wipe out the shipping immediately. But this is another one. I go back and forth between the two flavors. So try one. I wouldn't start with two. I would start with one and see what happens. If you like it, I got hooked immediately. So, I had to get a sponsor. I had to go to rehab, and the rest is history. And I'm allowed, through a certain amount of abstinence, to have some every day. Okay. Let's get into this story of John Belushi. This is a complicated story. Watch your BCS. We watch your BCS, your amazing storytelling. Oh, thank you, Pew Pew. What is BCS? I think this Pew Pew is in Norway, so we've gone international. Okay, but I got to get back to the story because it's really long and complicated. So this guy, John Belushi, which is his real name, Belushi, for those who are on the spectrum, it's S-H-I, Belushi. His parents are Albanian. His mother was an Albanian-American out of Chicago. The father was full-on Albanian. Now, Chicago has always been a melting pot for Eastern European countries. There's a picture of the mother, the father on the left. Now, the father, Adam, the mother, Agnes, she works in a pharmacy in Chicago, and he is a restaurant guy. He owns 2 restaurants, I think on North Avenue in Chicago. However, the fact of the matter is they are Albanian, and the grandmother speaks Albanian to him, and this is some early photos of him. The father gets hooked on American cowboy culture in Albania, and he's hooked on Bonanza. I guess they watched it dubbed in Albanian or something, and he comes over here, and all he believes is the United States is one big bonanza. This is a picture later on. John had bought a ranch for his father, Adam, on the left, and his father really knew how to ride and knew enough about ranching. This is in California, where he bought the ranch for him later when he made some money. But Agnes and Adam procreate a thing on January 24th, 1949, called John Belushi. Now he's got Billy and he's got Jimmy, the younger ones, and the 3 siblings. It's Marianne, who's a sister, Billy and Jimmy. They're Eastern Orthodox. That's his girlfriend. We'll get to that in a second. But they moved to a place called Wheaton, Illinois. This is in Wheaton. They moved to the suburbs. And Wheaton, Illinois is kind of a conservative Republican suburb, and they're kind of embarrassed, the kids, that they're Albanian. So they don't say they're Albanian for years. They say they're Italian. And apparently Italian is permissible, as an acceptable immigrant group in the 1950s already. So think about the Cold War. Think about Albania being behind the Iron Curtain. Now, they got out. Obviously, they're anti-communist and, pro-capitalist and pro-American. Somehow they fled from behind the Iron Curtain and got to Chicago. But Belushi had to act out scenes to communicate with his grandmother, Nina. And Nina was the maternal figure. Here's Nina. This is at the end of her life. She never spoke English. She only spoke Albanian. But John developed his facial techniques and his facial expressions to communicate to her as a kid because he loved her so much and was unable to linguistically communicate with her. So a lot of his facial gestures were designed to communicate with his grandmother, interestingly enough. Now, John goes to high school and is I want to say success story. I mean, it's crazy. He's the homecoming king. He played drums in a band called the Ravens that actually recorded. He gets this motorcycle in high school. He cuts a record with his band, the Ravens, singing and playing drums. He is a middle linebacker, all-star on the football team, and is all state. There he is, number 61. It's called Killer Belushi, and he is the captain of the varsity football team, and he's all conference as a middle linebacker. He's 5'9", 170. There he is again in a game. But this guy is super duper overachiever, successful. At the age of 16, he meets Judy Jacklin, who he just showed a picture of her. She will later become his wife, and this is actually, I think, one of their wedding photos. They don't get married till this is at the prom. I take that back because they don't get married till years later. So I think this might be a prom photo. Look at that baby face. Wow. Wow. 1965, he forms the group, the Ravens. They record a single, like I said, and he goes to summer stock after high school, and he gets into this exclusive summer stock situation where he doesn't know whether to go for a football scholarship or a theater scholarship, but he knows that his family does not have the money to send him to an expensive college, and he's rejected by a couple of colleges, and he ends up going to the College of DuPage in the fall of '68, and another community college that had drama departments, very similar to Robin Williams' story, by the way. Here he is looking at his hand, having a conversation with his hand. But he does go in '67, he does go to the University of Wisconsin in Whitewater, Wisconsin, if anybody knows where that is, 1967. He does this summer stock and then goes to see a show. Yeah, that's him in one of the summer stock things. He goes to see a show at Second City, and there's a guy there performing named David Steinberg, who will have his own episode at some point. Steinberg, he's just enamored with the power of these improv groups at Second City, and he tells Judy Jacklin, which is her maiden name, that I think it's a BMW bike, but I don't know about that. He tells her, this is what I want to do. I want to be in show business through improvisational theater, like Second City. So he majors in this 1967 and 1968. In the summer of 1968, he's involved in the Chicago demonstrations at the Democratic National Convention. Now, keep in mind, I think, and this is just my hunch, that he begins to become an extreme leftist, and because his father, this is a bone of contention for Belushi, so I'll see if I can translate this. His father kept these two restaurants in Chicago and never came home until the weekends. He would sleep upstairs at the restaurants, so he never got to see his dad like normal kids do. This is a picture of his father in the war, our war. His father does not come home at night. It's really strange. It's obviously 30 miles or whatever the distance is from Wheaton to Chicago, but the father stays and opens up the restaurant and works both of them in the morning. So he doesn't see his dad, and he's just got his mother and his siblings, and this really embitters him. But I think what really embittered him was the fact that his father lost both restaurants economically and had to take a job as a bartender. And I think this might have revolutionized Belushi against capitalism. When the night he died, for instance, at the end of the story, he had only one personal item in Bungalow 3 at the Chateau Marmont, and that was a giant poster on the wall of the bathroom of Karl Marx. So Belushi will also later get into the punk scene politically and musically. But at this point, he enrolls in the University of Illinois in Chicago, and in 1970, and they open up, him and his friends open up the Universal Life Coffee House, and they begin to do improv, and they form a group called the West Compass Trio, based after the Compass Players, which was another improv group from a couple of years before that, going back to the early 60s. He graduates in 1970 with an associate arts degree from that school. And now he's worried about being drafted and going to Vietnam. So he eats tons of salt to raise his blood pressure. And apparently this works. He gets a note from a doctor saying his blood pressure is through the roof. But he becomes an instant star on these this improv circuit, this Compass Players, and also at Second City. He joins Second City and immediately becomes the focus of Second City. He replaces a guy, by the way, who went to Europe for the summer, named Harold Ramis. Harold Ramis had been the star of Second City. There's a picture of Ramis. He will later go on to do Ghostbusters and a million other things. But at this point, he's replaced by John Belushi in the Second City troupe. And when he comes back, there is not the star spot for Ramis anymore. It's been taken over by John Belushi, who could literally walk on stage and get laughs because of his body language, facial expressions, very Chaplin-esque, very Buster Keaton-esque, how John was able to use silently his expressions to garner laughs and communicate with the audience. He gets out of, like I said, he gets out of Vietnam, but he meets people like Brian Doyle-Murray and Ramis, and eventually going up to Toronto, not to see the World Series, but to see this other Second City group up in Toronto. He meets Dan Aykroyd. He will also meet Gilda Radner, who comes out of Detroit. And he is offered a part in 1972. They're putting together something called National Lampoon's Lemmings. Now, National Lampoon had not had a movie yet. They had not had anything or TV show or anything else. However, they do put together a troupe with, this is the cover of the album, but they do put together a troupe with Chevy Chase, with Gilda Radner, with Christopher Guest. And it opens up, I think it's June 25th, 1973. Yeah, here's one of the cast lists here. It opens up the Village Gate, Art DeLugoff's place, where I put on the Toyota Comedy Festival a couple of decades later. This is called the Village Gate. And this is like a little photo from the Cocker imitation that he did. Let me just back up and tell you that the show was a parody of Woodstock, and Belushi would be the announcer. He would do stage announcements, parodies. This is a bit that he did with Chevy Chase. That's a long-haired Chevy Chase there, where Chevy Chase has bought bad drugs from Belushi, and he's taking the drugs back, complaining about the quality. They then put on two motorcycle helmets and run at each other, crashing their heads into each other in the sketch, forming a type of high from the concussion of banging their heads together from running across the stage. It's a very funny bit. This is obviously Belushi extending his Joe Cocker bit, which was impeccable, by the way. Chevy Chase was on drums, Christopher Guest on guitar. I think it was Paul Jacobs on piano. Rhonda Cooley was a backup singer for this bit. And he will later do this on Saturday Night Live, where Joe Cocker will come on himself. But Belushi really nailed his Cocker bit. But he was a great mimic, fantastic. He did an amazing Brando. He did a series of characters that were impeccable. And that's how he got the gig. Matty Simmons, who was my boss at Lampoon, was the producer of the show, along with a couple other people. But Matty, when he got the show off the ground, the first night they went there, there's a picture of Chevy with Belushi. They did not like each other. Let me put it that way. Belushi coming from a working class background and Chase more from a private school background. Chevy Chase had gone to the school that I went to, which was Bard College, and he was a drummer in a group that was to become Steely Dan. We'll get into that in the Chevy Chase episode, but Steely Dan was formed at Bard College, and Chase was the drummer. So Chase plays drums. Although Belushi was able to play drums, they went with Chevy Chase, and Belushi was making stage announcements, saying like "The man next to you is your dinner." It was parodies of Chip Monk, actually. If people know Woodstock culture, Chip Monk was the famous stage announcer at the Woodstock Music and Arts Fair. So this show opens. Oh, I just want to say that Matty Simmons, who was the owner of National Lampoon, who, by the way, fired me twice for reasons I don't remember anymore, he had to pay the back taxes when they went there the night to open it wasn't even his place. Dlugoff had not paid his taxes, and Matty had to pay $26,000 in federal taxes for Dlugoff to get the theater open. That's the Village Gate in downtown New York, which I thought was pretty funny. But he does, and he plays it. He pays it, and he opens it up. And Tony Hendra, one of the Lampoon editors, who was British. I don't know if people know who Tony Hendra was. He was also a stand-up comic or in a comic duo with people from England. I think Peter Cook and him and some other combinations. But Hendra became a force at National Lampoon as a writer. And he became the, if you want to say, showrunner or producer of this Lemming show. So it opens up in 1973, January 25th, and becomes a huge hit. And I mean huge. This is off Broadway, but there's lines around the block. And this is where, here's a picture. He's just about to put on that helmet, which is a very funny bit. The situation here is that Hendra allegedly turns John onto cocaine for the first time. That's kind of disputed by various people, but John does start doing large amounts of cocaine during Lemmings, combined with every other drug that is known to man. But Matty will hire John to be the head guy for the National Lampoon show, which is the next live show, and he makes him the director of the National Lampoon Radio Hour. Now, the National Lampoon Radio Hour is in the building itself where I used to work at 635 Madison Avenue, which was the headquarters for Lampoon. They build a recording studio in there, and they bring in the Murray brothers. They bring in Christopher Guest. They bring in people from the show. Gilda Radner is in there. And it's being run ostensibly by Michael O'Donoghue, who's another editor at National Lampoon, who I kind of tried to model myself after, but I was more in the Doug Kenny camp of doing offbeat political stuff. I don't know if you had anything that I used to do. Maybe we could show some of the stuff that I did. I kind of these guys were before me. I didn't come on to the Lampoons. This is from 87. I didn't come on to Lampoon until 85. So the stuff we're talking about now is like 73, 4, 5 in there before I was there. But I kind of like to do Doug Kenny and Michael O'Donoghue type of stuff, which was visual, political, and dark and somewhat sick. This is a Gay and Wilson cover, if you know who Gay and Wilson, one of the great illustrators in American comics history. There's Matty Simmons, who oddly enough wore a pair of socks once and then threw them away. Matty Simmons invented, it's just an incredible story about Matty Simmons. He invented the credit card up in Westport, Connecticut. He did an experiment with the banks, and they gave a line of credit to upscale residents of Westport, and they sent them a bill at the end of the month. Keep in mind, there was no credit cards yet. And this became the Diners Club credit card, based on this thing by Matty Simmons. He would then create Weight Watchers magazine. And then eventually he would have these guys, Doug Kenny, Henry Beard, and Rob Hoffman, come to him in 1970. This is Matty during a show we did when I was there called The Class of '86. This was like a third National Lampoon theater show. But Michael O'Donoghue became an editor from 1970 to 1974. But the three founding guys, Hoffman, Beard, and Doug Kenny, it was a nationalized version of the Harvard Lampoon for people who don't know the backstory. And these three guys had an agreement to get bought out at any time by Matty Simmons, and they waited a couple of years to when the coffers were filled to the brim with money, and then demanded to be bought out by Matty, who went batshit crazy. So so Matty, very successful, wanted to get into the movie business, and he eventually will with the 1978 Animal House. But what happens with the show at the Village Gate was that it's kind of become such a hit that everybody is seeing it. One of the people who sees that show is a guy from Canada, who's written for Lily Tomlin and has a bunch of writing credits as a comedy writer. People don't realize that. It was a guy named Lorne Michaels, and Lorne Michaels was already in show business. Lorne Michaels was connected with the Second City out of Toronto. Lorne Michaels comes down and sees the show, and he scoffs up everyone. Now, Matty does not want to be involved in television, because Matty could have done this, the SNL thing, but he was a big game hunter, and he wanted films. And he will score large with films, with Animal House, National Lampoon's Vacations, and European Vacations. All of the writers at Lampoon, we were told to think in terms of film. And, there was many success stories that came out of the magazine regarding films. Obviously, Chris Miller, who co-wrote Animal House, a friend of mine, was an editor before me, and he had written a bunch of different articles. One of them, interestingly enough, I don't know if people remember this, but there was an article that he had written called "The Seven Fires" or something. It's actually the origins of Animal House, which I'll get to in a second. But in 1975, in 1974, Belushi is recommended by Michael O'Donoghue, because they're putting together this crew. And Belushi goes in to audition, and he rags on TV. He hassles Lorne Michaels. He says he doesn't want this job. And Michaels just says, well, you're going to have to audition. And then he's outraged that he has to audition, because Gilda didn't have to audition, and Aykroyd didn't have to audition, but he kind of knew Aykroyd's work. But Lorne Michaels pushes back and starts busting Belushi's balls, saying you're going to have to audition. So he does audition. He comes in and does like this samurai sketch, and it blows everyone away, and he gets the job. This is Samurai Hotel, of course. Brilliant. He had seen Toshiro Mifune doing something on TV the night before, and picked up a mop and started to do a samurai sketch in his apartment with his girlfriend, Judy Jacklin. But John gets the part, but he is embittered because the star of the show is Chevy Chase. And the opening sketch, this is, I think, October 11, 1975. There's a shot from the opening sketch, actually, October 11, 1975, which is Michael O'Donoghue teaching language to an Albanian immigrant about eating the fingers of wolverines. And Michael O'Donoghue will do, this is a sidebar thing, but Michael O'Donoghue, who is a writer on the show, sometimes performer, and of course an editor at National Lampoon up until 1974, he will do this opening sketch with him and Belushi, this language sketch. But a number of months later, they needed to fill out some time at the end of the show. They had come up short, and they were in a panic backstage. And Lorne Michaels said, can anybody fill in some time here? And Michael O'Donoghue went out and said, I'd like to do my impersonation of Mike Douglas, the talk show host. I do it a little differently than most. This is Mike Douglas with a 12-inch sewing needles in his eyes. And he turns around with his back to the audience and turns back with his hands over his eyes, screaming bloody murder. And now keep in mind, this is live, and he's rolling on the stage, and he rolls off the stage into the audience. And that's how the credits begin rolling, with this Michael O'Donoghue improvised bit about Michael Douglas with sewing needles in his eyes. But anyway, in this sketch here, Chevy Chase will come out. Michael O'Donoghue has a heart attack as part of the sketch, and then Belushi, who's copying him, has a heart attack and falls down on the stage. And there's Michael O'Donoghue, aka Mr. Mike, Mr. Mike's Mondo Video, highly recommended. One of the darkest cats in show business. He had a girlfriend named Ann Beats. I'll tell you about that. Ann Beats worked at Lampoon, and one day, Belushi had gotten his girlfriend a job at Lampoon in the art department, and he went in and talked to Maddie. And Maddie gave her a job in the art department, and we had a very big art department. And he took away the desk of Judy Belushi one day and gave it to Ann Beats. And John Belushi went berserk. John Belushi was always fighting with Michael O'Donoghue anyway, but they were very close. And Maddie, not to be a phibissant or anything, he took away Judy Jacqueline's desk. It's just a physics problem, and gave it to Ann Beats. It didn't even faze him. He didn't do it himself. I mean, he ordered someone to do it. And Belushi came up and went berserk over her desk being taken away from her. There's a shot of Aykroyd and Belushi and Michael O'Donoghue. I think it's in the hallway at SNL. Anyway, Belushi came up and went berserk. And I'm going to tell you a story right now, because this is why you watch the show. So Maddie's in his office with these suits, Maddie being a suit himself, but he's in there with other investors trying to raise money for the magazine and to raise money for films and do different things. These were potential investors in suits. And he goes to lunch with them, and he goes out to lunch and leaves the building. This is on Madison Avenue, in case anybody knows, in the 50s, streetwise. So he goes out with these investors. Now, John Belushi goes into his office when he's not there, opens up his desk drawer, climbs on top of his desk, pulls his pants down, and takes a dump in Maddie's drawer, and then closes the drawer, pulls up his pants, and leaves. Maddie comes back from lunch, and he continues the meeting with these 3 or 4 investors, and begins to smell something coming out of his desk drawer. And he opens it up, and he sees the defecation of John Belushi in his drawer. And he automatically knows that Belushi did this, and just starts screaming Belushi at the top of his lungs. He's not even in the building anymore. And this is all in retaliation for taking his girlfriend's desk away. So just so you know what Belushi was all about. So Night of the Seven Fires was an article Chris Miller wrote. And in the Night of the Seven Fires article in Lampoon, Chris Miller will also write about Dartmouth and the fraternity, which will also become part of National Lampoon's Animal House. But one of the articles it was based on is Night of the Seven Fires. The Seven Fires were 7 barn fires set on a hill, going up the hill, and the frat boys had to drink enough beer to get drunk enough to projectile vomit, to put out the 7 fires. That was removed from the script. Also removed from the Animal House script was a beer barrel projectile going through the head of JFK on the float as if it was a bullet from the grassy knoll. This went through a paper mache float of JFK, which you do see later in the movie. That was removed for being just over the top. But yeah, some of the characters that Belushi did on SNL, he did Fred Silverman, who was the president of NBC. That was insane. And like I said, Maddie begins to try to put these movies together with Doug Kenny, Harold Ramis, and Chris Miller, who are not involved with SNL. So there's two different camps. There's the camp that's still doing the radio show at Lampoon and also the magazine. And then you've got the rest of the camp that's over at NBC and Studio 8H doing SNL. So they begin working on Animal House, and it turns out to be an 114-page treatment. They haven't even written a script. So Maddie is shopping this treatment around, and it's insane because they don't have a script, and the treatments are usually, a treatment in Hollywood is usually about 10 to 20 pages. So, but they don't know this, and they write a 114-page treatment, but it's breathtakingly funny. And nobody gets it in Hollywood except two young guys who were junior executives, very young at Universal, Sean Daniel and Tom Mount. These two guys see the potential of this script being turned into a movie, which it does, called National Lampoon's Animal House. Now, that was not the original cast that they wanted for Animal House. Belushi was always going to be Belushi. The name Bluto comes from Chris Miller's Dartmouth fraternity. And I'll just tell you a story that Chris Miller told me about his fraternity at Dartmouth. They were drinking heavily, listening to a high-speed police chase of somebody on the radio. And at the end of the police chase, the guy crashes into a tree, killing himself on the Dartmouth campus. And this is a live radio broadcast. So the fraternity brothers take their beer mugs and walk outside to look at what was going on. And the guy's brains were splattered on the tree, and they scooped up the brains into their beer mugs and took them back to the fraternity house. This was their Delta house. This was also removed from the script, by the way, but a true story is told to me by Chris Miller. Anyway, there were certain things that didn't make it in there, certain things that did. They couldn't find a place to shoot it. And there was a guy up in Eugene, Oregon, some naive college president who had passed on allowing them to shoot a movie at another college where he was president of, and that movie was The Graduate. So he said, I don't know anything by reading these scripts, and gave them permission to shoot Animal House at this college in Eugene, Oregon. That was a stupid move. Anyway, so D-Day, you see there on the far left, Bruce McGill, that was supposed to be Dan Aykroyd. It was written for Dan Aykroyd. All of these characters were written with specific people in mind. Peter Riegert, who I will later meet and have a thing with. Peter Riegert was supposed to be Bill Murray, and that was supposed to be Boone. D-Day was supposed to be Dan Aykroyd, and Tim Matheson, who will later purchase National Lampoon magazine, was supposed to be Chevy Chase. And you could see that quite clearly if you look at them. Hoover was supposed to be Hoover, I think. But Flounder, interestingly enough, was delivering pizzas in Hollywood, and he would put his 8x10 glossy inside a box of pizzas. The craziest thing, I guess he taped it to the inside of his box, and he delivered a pizza to Maddie Simmons, who then cast him in Animal House. So it worked for Flounder, that is. But these guys did not want to leave SNL, so they did not accept the parts in the movie. They will later do, Caddyshack, and Aykroyd will later, obviously work with John on Blues Brothers and stuff. But at this point, they cast these other guys, Bruce McGill and Peter Riegert, and Thomas Hulsey, who will then work in Amadeus and then disappear from the face of the earth. So July 28th, 1978. It was Otter was the character. Now, there was an otter, a real otter, according to Chris Miller, who had like teeth like a beaver. And he was the big man on campus, womanizing wise, even though he had these buck teeth. But Chevy Chase went on to take Foul Play, which is what he wanted to do as opposed to Animal House. So he makes the Goldie Hawn movie, which turns him into a movie star. Foul Play with Goldie Hawn. So Chase kind of also had great representation at that time. So this movie comes out July 28th, 1978, goes through the roof. Lines around the block. John Landis is the director. He knows how to do this. This is obviously the three of them reading the paper about themselves from the movie. But Landis had made a couple of weird little indie films and gets hired because of his age and these two little indie films. Landis had secretly, yeah, this is that when it opens, it becomes the cover of Newsweek and everything else. But Landis had worked as a quasi stuntman for a number of years just to be close to Hollywood production to see how it worked. Very interesting guy, John Landis. He is like a nerdy Spielbergian tech guy and will later team up with, become friends with Spielberg, as directors. But right now, what happens, this movie becomes so huge and such a juggernaut, it becomes the highest grossing comedy up until that time. And the budget on it was so low. This is obviously John emerging from the Deathmobile after they cut the cake with the D-Day driving the cake through the parade. You will see Doug Kenny lead the marching band down an alleyway until they all crash in this dead-end alleyway. Belushi will do as Errol Flynn. He'll get up on top of the roof and glide down on the banner, picking up one of the female members of Omega House, and end up being Senator Blutarsky and marrying her in the end credits, as people know the movie. It became such a huge hit that they tried to copy it, and it became a genre in itself. The genre did not exist. The college comedy, frat, everything from Porky's on down the line were all copies or attempted copies of the success of Animal House, which created a college humor. Here he is with Gene Shalit with the greatest hair in NBC history. They did make a TV version called Delta House, which was on ABC. It didn't work. Nobody wanted to be on it, but I think D-Day was on it. Bruce McGill was in it, I think. And this is Belushi being interviewed about Animal House by Gene Shalit. Belushi is now getting more and more into drugs and alcohol, and but still managing to work. Kevin Bacon's first film, he gets flattened out at the end, as people recall. Kevin Bacon ends up, this is when Dean Wormer is telling them and him that his grade point average is 0.0, and tells Flounder it's no way to go through life, fat, drunk, and stupid, son. Wormer is unbelievable. Vernon, great casting, and his wife is seduced by Tim Matheson, by the Otter character. And I love the set design of Otter's room, by the way, which was absolutely fantastic, like something out of a Dean Martin movie, with the way they had recessed lighting and mood music and a full bar in his room. Apparently that was true of the real Otter, according to Chris Miller. So the Bluto becomes a national cultural icon as a character. And to avoid being typecast, Belushi has to quickly begin to do other characters to get away from this Bluto thing. And I don't know if he ever really shaked it. Here's the scene when he goes down the food line. Now, this scene here is being coached off screen by John Landis, who is telling him what to do. It's covered over by music and post-production, but Landis is literally yelling, take the sandwiches, take the Jell-O, eat the Jell-O, stuff the stuff in your pocket. Landis knew what he was doing, and he's kind of like the comedy version of Marty Scorsese. He will get in trouble when he tries to do the Twilight Zone movie, where a few people lost their lives in that movie, and he had to go stand trial for murder. But hey, it's Hollywood. Forget about it, Jake. But at this point, Landis is verbally directing Belushi on what to physically do here. And Belushi, scoffs down the entire cheeseburger at the end. And as I said, Landis is yelling these things out. This is one take, by the way. I don't think they did another take on this. in terms of the film. Now, one of the brilliant things that Landis did was to bring in the legendary Elmer Bernstein to do the score. And if you listen to the score of Animal House, it legitimizes it as a big budget Hollywood movie, which it's not. But the score works to literally make it sound like a big studio picture. Brilliant move. Apparently, he knew Elmer Bernstein's kid from school. The history of that helped Landis quite a bit because he did grow up in West LA, apparently not with money, but on the edge of West LA, the edge of Beverly Hills, the flats, I believe. And his house actually overlooked the cemetery at the Veterans Administration on Wilshire. So he had a tree house that he built as a kid, if I remember, overlooking the cemetery there. Yeah. Anyway, so the movie makes a lot of money, but not for John Belushi. John Belushi is paid $35,000 to do Animal House, which grosses millions and millions of dollars for Universal Pictures. Now, they immediately want to do a sequel, and they kick around different ideas to do Animal House 2. One of the ideas, according to Chris Miller, was to set it in the summer of love in San Francisco. They're hippies now. So that becomes their goal, but that will never be realized. That will never, and probably for good reason. The situation after this is that he wants to do a real movie, and he signs up. This is Belushi, signs up for a movie with Jack Nicholson, who's one of his idols. Jack Nicholson is directing a cowboy comedy, country cowboy comedy in Mexico, or I think maybe they shot it in New Mexico, but it's called Going South. Here's a picture of the thing. And Belushi shows up from New York, and keep in mind, he's still on. He's still active. He does a couple of years on SNL, but he's going back and forth. And after Chevy Chase leaves after the first season in 1975, Belushi becomes the star of the show in 1976, in 1977, and he likes it that way. And he was having trouble with Belushi, with Chevy Chase on the show because he was stealing the limelight. Nevertheless, October 6, 1978, Going South opens up. Belushi went to the set and was completely paranoid from cocaine, got into a fight, physical altercation with the two producers, didn't like his accommodations. This gets back to Nicholson, who is directing this movie, who is appalled, literally appalled. He gave this guy this little bit part in the movie, and he's making a giant scene, not on set, but just merely in the accommodations, and gets into a fight with the producers and is just about to be fired. They end up whittling his scene down to 3 minutes of screen time in this first movie he's ever on. But his behavior on the set and in the movie is so appalling that it almost cost him his career right out of the gate. He just is out of his mind. I don't know if he was on acid or what drugs he was taking, but Nicholson couldn't believe that this was even happening. So that movie comes out, loses money, of course. I mean, it was Nicholson directed. I think he did 3 movies as a director. Drive, he said, and The Two Jakes, probably the 3 Nicholson movies, but that's a story for another day. Okay, so in September 78, another movie will come out. He opens for, yeah, there's a photo. There's a photo of one of the 3 minutes that Belushi is in Going South. Not a bad performance, but one of the sketches that they create back on SNL are these characters called the Blues Brothers. And I remember being at the Lone Star one night when Willie Nelson was playing, and they came out and began to rehearse or prepare this sketch, which was the Blues Brothers at the Lone Star Cafe downtown. And I was there that night, and I said, wow, this is interesting. And they're playing it with the band there. And they convinced Lorne Michaels to do it do it as a thing on the show. But Lorne Michaels is already into booking name acts like the Rolling Stones, and he's going like, well, I don't know how this fills in, but you can do the warm-up for the show. And that's what they begin doing. There's maybe a photo of that here. From the warm-up, it will later extend to actually doing songs on the show as musical guests, which Michaels did not want to do. This is obviously one of the Blues Brothers there with his harp. And from that sketch, they put the band together and begin to do live shows. And the band that they put together is an all-star band with Tom Malone and Alan Rubin and Blue Lou Marini and Cropper and Duck Dunn, Steve Cropper, the legendary guitar player. They put together an all-star band and they begin to play live shows, and it's a huge hit. They opened for Steve Martin at Universal here in town. Steve Martin had a 9-night engagement at Universal. I think it's 5,000 or 6,000 seater, and the amphitheater. And they opened for him, and here he is with Steve Martin. The reverse, Steve Martin used to open for rock bands, and now Belushi and Aykroyd and the Blues Brothers are opening for Steve Martin. And they're kind of stealing the show because the crowd is going apeshit. They're playing like 40 minutes, for an opening act with this incredible all-star band. And John can't really sing. I always thought that Aykroyd was a very good harp player. But, he's got a gravelly voice, John, and he doesn't really know blues. He's turned on to blues by Aykroyd, and he becomes obsessed with it, listening to record after record after record. But he was not a blues guy. He was more of a 50s, 60s rock guy. But after this set at Universal, backstage, there are people like Linda Ronstadt coming to see him. Joe Cocker comes in to congratulate him, Jackson Browne, Mick Jagger, and he begins to become a rock star in his mind. In 1978, they released an album called, December 5th, 1978, they released an album called Briefcase Full of Blues. Now, it's kind of interesting because he wanted to hire members of Roomful of Blues, Doug Schliet being an old friend of mine. Duke Robillard unplugs his guitar at the Lone Star and walks off. He doesn't believe Belushi knows anything about the blues, and Duke Robillard certainly does, one of the great blues guitarists of all time. And instead of hiring Roomful, which is what I think he wanted to do, he picked these various session men to be the Blues Brothers band. But that being said, Briefcase Full of Blues sounded too close to Roomful of Blues for my comfort. I think that's where they lifted it from. Roomful of Blues, Briefcase Full of Blues. You could be the judge of that, but it sells 1 million albums within a couple of months when it's released December 5th, 1978. And they begin to tour to back up this album. The album's really good. The Blues Brothers movie that is coming out after this is released in 1980, but that movie springs from there's Landis with the Blues Brothers. Landis comes up with this idea that he could be the director of this Blues Brothers movie, and Aykroyd and Belushi, of course, want to do it. And here's like a little slate on this thing. It's from the 14th of September, 1979. Wow, look at that. Camera run by cats. They will destroy 104 vehicles in this course of the movie. They will take over the city of Chicago. You all know the plot of this. They have to raise money to pay the back taxes on the orphanage that they were raised in. This is, I think, the premiere of the movie. Yeah, I mean, it's got Aretha Franklin, James Brown in place of Little Richard, who was supposed to do it. Ray Charles, fantastic scene of Ray Charles inside of the Ray Charles music store, Ray's. What they wanted to do was reinvigorate the careers of these blues heroes of theirs. And in fact, it does. James Brown said he was dead and buried. All of these guys economically were dead and buried during that time period in the late 70s when disco ruled the earth. This is, I think they're being chased by the Nazis at this point with that orange car in the back, which they'll drop from a helicopter. There's some amazing, amazing scenes. They were way ahead of their time. The budget of this film would balloon to over or near $30 million, the level of Apocalypse Now. It was $30 million in 1978 money, by the way. The mayor of Chicago, there he is with some guitar player from the Rolling Stones and James Brown, who will play a preacher in this at the beginning of the movie. And Jake and Elwood will attend this preaching by James Brown, which, like I said, was supposed to be Little Richard. But nevertheless, the movie makes a lot of money for the studios. And the final scene of the movie, this is kind of ironic, the final scene of the movie, when they have to get into, there's so many, the entire army units are in this movie. 104 vehicles are destroyed, police cars stacked up. They find an old shopping mall and they reopen it with props. And then they have a chase scene through the shopping mall. The blues music is impeccable. If you're a blues fan, which I am, it may not be of interest to other people, but John Lee Hooker, Boom, Boom, Boom. I mean, Aretha Franklin singing "Think" with Matt Guitar Murphy as her husband. I mean, we knew all these artists before that. So to me, it was fascinating to see them play. And he brings out Cab Calloway doing Minnie the Moocher. This is outside the cafe where they go in and order chicken and white toast from Aretha Franklin, and Blue Lou Marini is the dishwasher, and the legendary Matt Guitar Murphy is the short order cook playing her husband. And Aretha wanted to sing Respect, but it didn't fit in thematically, so he convinced her to sing Think, which works because he's leaving her to go back on the road and lose money. And the plot of the movie is putting the band back together. There's John with Aretha Franklin in the restaurant. The plot is to put the band back together. John has been in prison in Joliet for a number of years. He gets out at the beginning of the movie and finds his brother, and they proceed to put the band back together. And they've all taken various straight jobs, and that's where kind of the humor comes in to play in the movie. Huge. And this is a picture of a guy who I know named Joe Walsh. Now, Joe Walsh, of course, of the Eagles, is in the final scene when they're back in prison at the end of the movie. The Blues Brothers and the Blues Brothers band get arrested at the end by John Candy, and they get sentenced to prison, and they start to play Jailhouse Rock. And Joe Walsh will jump up on that table and begin a riot by dancing around at the very end of the movie. You barely would know it was Joe Walsh. I don't think it's credited, but that is indeed Joe Walsh, my friends, who will take a guy. Now, John Belushi will begin to use heavy amounts of cocaine on the set of the Blues Brothers movie. So much cocaine that one night he just walks off the set, goes into a neighborhood, knocks on a guy's door, and random guy in a house. And he says, "You know who I am?" And James, also James Gang. That's right. He will walk into this guy's house who lets him go into his house. He eats everything in his refrigerator and then falls asleep on the guy's couch while they're shooting the movie. Nobody knows where he is. And Dan Aykroyd starts walking through neighborhoods, and the only house that has its lights on, this is 2:30 in the morning, is this one house. And he knocks on the door and he says, "But we're shooting a movie nearby. Have you seen any of our actors?" And the guy goes, "There's one on the couch." And it's John Belushi snoring away on the couch, passed out. And Dan will have to consistently be his babysitter regarding drugs and disappearances. So they hire a guy to actually do this. And the guy's name is Wendell, Smokey Wendell. Now, Smokey Wendell is an interesting guy. He becomes like a sober companion They bring him in to be a sober companion for John. Now, Smokey Wendell used to be in the Secret Service as the bodyguard, Secret Service agent, White House detail for Richard Nixon. Here he is here in a photo with John. He will try to prevent John from doing copious amounts of cocaine. Very good at it. Very good at blocking people and you know, guys coming into the studio when he was recording. A guy comes in, puts the cocaine in the men's room in the paper towel dispenser, and then indicated that John should go to the bathroom, but Smokey heads him off and gets the cocaine out of the paper towel dispenser, plus a million events just like that. Wendell was very good at this and was able to prevent him from doing a lot of cocaine. Eventually, he will be replaced by someone else. But interestingly enough, this will be an interesting theme because there are people around John who have, let me just say, unusual law enforcement backgrounds, and I'll get into the list of them in a little while. But the Blues Brothers movie, like I said, opens up, and it is a hit as well. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And Spielberg is in the final scene of the movie. He plays a clerk that stamps the receipt for the money. This is actually the day of the shooting. He will play a county clerk who gives them the receipt for turning in the money to save the orphanage from being foreclosed upon by the city of Chicago, a little bit part that Landis asked Spielberg to do. Now, Spielberg, no dummy, he asks John Belushi to play the part of Wild Bill Kelso, a P-40 bomber pilot in his comedy 1941. He pays him $350,000. That movie comes out December 14th, 1979, and everybody realizes here's a shot of Wild Bill Kelso. And Aykroyd's in there as a tank commander, by the way. So they begin to work together. But as they're shooting and people are looking at the dailies, Spielberg keeps asking people, is this funny? And admits soon afterwards that he will never do another comedy again, has no idea how comedy works. And the fighter pilot role that he has while he's acting. Dennis, thanks a lot. The P-40 is a fighter. Very helpful, Dennis. Go back to the spectrum. Thanks for helping me with the story because I was going to stop and talk about that for about an hour. The situation with the movie is that Spielberg doesn't know how to do comedy. And the situation becomes really bad when they start looking at the dailies. And it is not funny at all. And that becomes another bomb. And Spielberg will never do comedy again. Because of this situation. Now, they were worried, in case you don't know the plot of the movie, it was a panic in LA in 1941 about being bombed by the Japanese, and they sent up fighter pilots to bomb submarines or Japanese vessels that might be at sea. There's a cartoon version of him in the P-40. The idea was to bomb Japanese submarines when they surfaced. Off the coast of Santa Monica, by the way. Meanwhile, Del Close, there's Spielberg. Yeah, that's the actual scene of Spielberg playing the county clerk. I always got a kick out of that. But the situation becomes more dire as more and more drugs are being used by Belushi. So they need to keep an eye on him. And he's beginning to become more and more of a hazard. Like I said, he walked off the set. Landis said they lost maybe 5 complete days of shooting simply because of the drug abuse of John Belushi, which is an enormous amount of money. This is him at the end when it was really getting crazy. And the next movie that he does is something called Old Boyfriends in 1979, directed by a chick named Joan Tewksbury, who was a comedy writer. It's the first movie starring Talia Shire. It is not a easy movie to watch. It's Talia Shire. You remember her from The Godfather and Rocky. She's the star of this movie. It is a weird movie, to say the least. She wants to go back in her diary, find her old boyfriends, and torture them by dumping them. There's 3 vignettes, 3 different boyfriends. Belushi is the second boyfriend, and she does all this stuff to get them and dump them, and it's like, it's not even a watchable movie. It's completely insane, but it opens up at the Cannes Film Festival. It's kind of like an art film of some sort. Belushi is a lounge singer with a rock band, and plays proms and clubs around where he lives. And yeah, here's a shot of him with his band, and she will take him in a car and beg him for sex, take him to a lover's lane, have him undress to have sex with her on the ground outside the car, and then leave him there in his underwear. Yeah, there's a shot of her driving off, and you're just going like, what the fuck is this thing? Totally bizarre film. Again, he's trying to work in various genres to avoid being typecast. The 1980, the Blues Brothers movie is released. This Old Boyfriend, you just want to shoot yourself in the head from this movie. Buck Henry has a little tiny part as a private eye, by the way. So that comes out in 79. 1980, June 20th, the Blues Brothers movie is released. Like I said, it's a big hit. It kind of makes its money back. The studio is very nervous. It kept going over budget, overshooting. That will come out a lot later. But the next movie to come out in 1981 is a movie where the director is a guy named John Avildsen. Now, John Avildsen directs this movie, Neighbors. Now, Neighbors is written based on a novel. This is totally insane, this movie. It's based on a novel, but the screenplay is written by Larry Gelbart. MASH, Tootsie, one of the great comedy screenwriters, one of the great TV comedy writers of all time. This is 1981. They switch parts. John is having a physical altercations with John Avildsen on the set. He's gone completely megalo, at times having to be restrained from beating up John Avildsen. They switch roles. There's a punk rocker that is moving next door with his wife, Kathy Moriarty, from Raging Bull. They move next door to this real square guy with his wife and make their lives a living hell by, crashing into their house and making dinner and stealing money from them and everything else. But it's a comedy. And they switch parts, and Belushi plays the straight guy, and Aykroyd plays the wild and crazy guy. And it is very difficult to watch. Another bomb for Belushi. The film descends into madness. Belushi's just doing so much blow that he could barely function. He can't come out of his trailer at times. It's really getting out of control. You can see the seeds of where this is going to go, and it's already 1981. So he's into Quaaludes, heavy-duty amounts of Quaaludes, heavy-duty amounts of cocaine, literally, quarter ounces a night, just going absolutely bonkers. At the time, people believed, for reasons other than New York Magazine, I don't understand, that cocaine was non-addictive. So in 1981, in October, this movie flops also, by the way, Neighbors. Despite opening in the Cannes Film Festival, nobody could figure out what the hell this thing's supposed to be. They had to reshoot the ending. John burns the house down after throwing a TV through the window. It's absolutely a train wreck of a movie. Again, he is trying to find a non-Bluto type of character. Now, he does this movie in 1981 named Continental Divide. Now, Continental Divide, shown here, with the lovely Blair Brown, who had been in Altered States, if anybody remembers that film. Continental Divide is him playing this Chicago journalist named Mike Royko. And he is assigned to go up. This is with the newsstand guy, but that's the character, Mike Royko. He's called something else in the movie. But they're trying to create like a Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn thing. He goes up to the Rockies to do a story on Blair Brown, who is a birdologist or an ornithologist, photographing eagles or something. And it's a fish out of water story. Here he is with his backpack, and he's a chain smoking fat bastard. He lost 40 pounds, by the way, to do this role. So he's clearly not fat here, but this is their attempt to make him into a romantic lead like Chevy Chase. And he wants to do what Chevy's doing. This is the lovemaking scene of the movie, which is hard to watch. Blair Brown is absolutely gorgeous, and John looks like a hairy beast. They're in like a tent up in the Rockies, and he believes that he could be a leading man in a rom-com. At least the studios believe that. And Continental Divide comes out in 1981, and that will lose money. Again, it's just like what they're doing is, and what they try to do and what they try to pull off was, people showed up for these movies thinking they were going to see Bluto. The studios knew that, so they opened them up wide so they could get as much cash as possible before the word of mouth spread. There were riots at some of these screenings when they first opened, where the initial studio audience would start to tell the guys waiting online, saying, "Get away, get your money back. It's not Animal House. It's a bullshit romantic comedy." So the word of mouth will force the picture to lose momentum within a week. And it's the best the studios could do to recoup some of their lost money in 1981. John is now going to the Playboy Club. He's now, becoming crazed from drugs and alcohol. And his brother Jimmy is brought in to try to help him. His wife is losing her mind. Jimmy gets into a fist fight with his brother John in the middle of the street of Chicago, trying to take his drugs away. Simultaneously, in 1980, in August, Doug Kenny will fall from a cliff in Hawaii while looking for a good place to jump off the cliff to self-delete. He's 33 years of age. So that is another setback. Again, Doug Kenny doing tons and tons of cocaine with Chevy Chase. And I mean tons. They would put lines on their arms and snort up a line off of their own arms. Yeah, he was snorting cocaine on the set of SNL in the sketches, in real sketches, just, disrupting rehearsals, getting fired by Lorne Michaels. He lasts from 1975 to 1979, disrupting the rehearsals. He's fighting with Jane Curtin. He's doing coke online. He's on the show. He's fighting with the writers. He's fired, like, I want to say 3 or 4 times, based on the stories from the cast and crew. Landis wants him to do a movie based on the life of P.T. Barnum, which I thought might have been interesting. And then Louis Malle shows up with John Guare from House of Blue Leaves, and they're shopping a movie to him about the Abscam scandal. People remember that, these congressional the congressmen who got involved with this Abscam thing. They want to make a comedy out of that. And then he's offered a part in SCTV, which he turns down. But Joe Walsh is the guy that sends Smokey Wendell to be John's sober companion. Wendell had been the sober companion for Joe Walsh, who had his own problems. But Wendell does the best he can. And like I said, in 1980, John will hire a guy named Bill Superfoot Wallace, who is a karate expert and kickboxer, and becomes his personal trainer, to help him get in shape for these movies. Now they're shopping around a script called The Joy of Sex, National Lampoon's Joy of Sex. And it's supposedly Belushi supposed to play an aging baby to a teenager to an adult in pursuit of sex. It's based on the manual, the book that was a sex manual, really had no plot in the book, but it was a property that the studios had bought, and they wanted to turn it into a movie. And John would have been perfect for this, but he is now getting into immense amounts of cocaine. And I mean immense amounts of cocaine. He is back to his highest weight, and he's been surrounded by various people who may or may not been looking out for his best interests. And he is running around Hollywood, meeting with the studios. Yeah, there's it's kind of a dark image right there. It's a miracle that he survived this long, to be honest with you, because um, the management that he has, Bernie Brillstein, has a system where they keep running him cash wherever he is. And when I say cash, I mean $600, $900, $500 in cash, because every other expense he has is covered. He's made a lot of money. He bought this ranch for his family. He bought a bunch of properties, one in Martha's Vineyard, a house there. And he really has everything covered except drugs. So they have a $2,500 per diem from the studios, and that is his drug money. They know it. Brillstein knows it. He knows it. Everyone knows it. And he begins to start shooting up speedballs. This goes back to Del Close, though. Del Close was the head of Second City, who was already in 1979 shooting up Belushi in the ass with heroin and cocaine. So it's didn't happen literally in 1982ish. It started like in the late 70s that he was doing this. And also after he had some knee surgery, they put him on morphine, and that exacerbated the heroin habit. And all of these people lied for him and covered for him and did all this stuff. But nevertheless, he was so out of control, so crazy, so dislikable at this point in his life. He's running into studio meetings and yelling and screaming and disrupting things all over the planet. He gets hooked on this band Fear, this LA punk band, and he somehow convinces Lorne Michaels to put him on SNL, and they have a mosh pit. These guys are banging their heads together and bleeding. They knocked over the cameras. One of the grips got hurt. He's obsessed with this band Fear. He actually sits in and drums with them at one point, and he wants to put them in the movies. He wants to put them in Neighbors as a soundtrack, and nobody will allow him to do it. Yeah, it's interesting that they also wanted him for Three Amigos if everything had gone right. And Dan was back in New York working on a movie for the two of them, and he kept calling John saying, "Get out of Hollywood. It's a death camp. Come back here and work with me on this movie." Is that the guy from Fear? Yeah, I guess so. Wow, Durf or someone. Yeah, he's obsessed with Fear, and also the Dead Kennedys. Which I can understand. I don't know about Fear, but he's obsessed with these two bands. They open up a bar called the Blues Bar, which is really just a clubhouse down on Dominic and Hudson Street over by the tunnel. And it has no cash. It's not a money place. It's just like a clubhouse with a bar. And various people will tend bar after the SNL shows. Now, the SNL will go downstairs in Rockefeller Center, have a party there, and then people would go to the Blues Bar down there. Even I tended bar there one night. So the Blues Bar is kind of a hangout for after the show crowd. The situation, I guess that's Elton John or someone, right? Yeah. Yeah, he begins to think he's a rock star. And, he's got an album. He's got 2 or 3 albums come out under the Blues Brothers heading, and but his drug situation is so out of control. It's Warren Zevon. Yeah, talk about drug problems. Warren Zevon send lawyers, guns, and money. Warren Zevon was at the level of Belushi in drug abuse, from what I remember. Yeah, Noble Rot was the script they were trying to get made, which was a diamond heist movie that he was writing with Don Novello, Guido Sarducci. And when the script was done, he passed it around, and every single person who read it was appalled by how bad it was. And he wouldn't let it go. And I'm talking about everyone, friends, you know, people who were in the business, other people who were close to him, studio people. Nobody wanted to touch this movie, and they wanted him to do National Lampoon's Joyous Sex, which had a screenplay written by John Hughes, who wasn't famous yet, and a director who hadn't directed yet, but had a deal, and her name was Penny Marshall. So John didn't want to work with Penny Marshall because they were close friends, and he didn't know who didn't matter about John Hughes. There was just a scene at the beginning where it's supposed to be the poster of him in a diaper, and he just kept ranting and raving about how they wanted him to be in a diaper. I mean, he goes and sees the Deer Hunter, and he says, "Why aren't they sending me these scripts?" The hubris is unbelievable. I mean, he has no formal acting training. He was in a couple of these improv groups, and he thinks he's, again, Robert De Niro. Now, one of the friends he goes to see is a guy named Robin Williams, who's on Mork and Mindy, and he goes over there to see their hero, Jonathan Winters, who's playing the father or son, as it may be, of Mork on Mork and Mindy, and they both bond because they both worship Jonathan Winters. I believe he did have cocaine psychosis. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people aren't hip to it because nobody had that kind of money to do that kind of cocaine in those period of years yet. Because he's got the paranoia, he's into Quaaludes, he's into speedballs, he's into the coke. The coke is enormous, the amount of coke, and I think it was cocaine psychosis, to be honest with you, which is rare because you need all that money, as Malcolm knows, to do that amount of cocaine to get cocaine psychosis. So it is kind of rare. But Belushi thinking it was Robin Williams. In a lot of ways, he was Robin Williams, except Robin Williams had formal acting training at Juilliard, and John didn't. But they become friends, and Robin Williams will also try to do these serious movies. There's a similarity in that Robin Williams is able to also make a bunch of really bad movies, but he gets a couple of hits like John does, and they're in the comedy thing, but they want to all be De Niro. Now, De Niro and Belushi will become drug buddies, and they will start doing drugs together because De Niro's out in L.A. when Belushi is there at the same time, and he's also, no training, Mac, yeah. But, I mean, Robin does have immense training, and will use it, but John has nothing to tap into, and I have a theory behind this whole thing. These guys who came from improv, unless they're working in an ensemble comedy film, which is very difficult to create, they can't carry a picture. Chevy Chase did not come from that world. Hence, he was able to carry a picture. The perfect example of this is Eddie Murphy, who came from stand-up, did SNL, and was not in these improv groups. He was able to carry a picture. But Belushi, they were trying to they didn't know what to do with him because to create an ensemble picture takes almost a perfect script because you have to write parts for the other people. And that's what Belushi was trying to put together, these ensemble things with SCTV people and all the people around him. The reason SCTV worked is because he had come from improv and these groups that worked ensemble wise, but that's hard to pull off in a movie. Movies want bankable movie stars. Again, Aykroyd couldn't do it because that's the world Aykroyd came from. Aykroyd will be a second banana. He will try to do Dr. Detroit and quickly realize that Judd Apatow, Snickle Fritz, Judd Apatow will put his little troupe together and write these little ensemble pieces. But it's hard to pull off consistently. And it's hard to bank on an entire ensemble when the movie business is built on stars. Let me just leave it at that. But John doesn't know this, doesn't care. And he just wants to do what he wants to do. And he wants to make this noble rot movie in the worst ways. Yeah, lots of ensemble movies fail big time. It's the hardest thing to pull off in movie making for obvious reasons. So nevertheless, John is running around with this script that nobody wants to make, and they're trying to save his career, and they're telling him. Everyone is telling him. Now his agent is an obscure guy with a new agency named Mike Ovitz. Eisner is running Paramount at this point, and he's got Bernie Brillstein and that whole group behind him. He's got the most powerful people. He fires Brillstein at one time. He fires Mike Ovitz. He's just on a run that goes on and on and on. Finally, not ending well on that night at the Chateau Marmont. But nevertheless, Steve Martin could carry a film, and so could Chevy Chase, and he can't handle this Belushi, and they don't know what to do with him. That attempt to make him into a rom-com star, it was just difficult to watch. Now, one of his co-connections is a guy named Richard Baer, who was a keyboard player, and he and these others, including Kathy Evelyn Smith, who I will get into in a second, are part of this circle of supplying him with drugs when he's in Los Angeles. And they are part of his inner circle. And what he's doing is just running around from event to event to event. It's not the traveling Wilburys, that's for sure. But he's just on the loose, on a run. It just goes on for months and months. The situation is that nobody can stop him, including his wife, including Dan Aykroyd, and everyone knows this is a train wreck. They all acted as if this happened overnight. They all lied about it, and they all went crazy about it after he died. But in fact, this was going on for years, trying to stop him from doing it. I mean, there's the Chateau Marmont. He's in Bungalow 3 in the back. De Niro's in the penthouse that night. Robin Williams shows up. He's over there with Kathy Evelyn Smith. Now, Kathy Evelyn Smith, and just to get into her for a second, Kathy has been discredited as some skank hanger-on drug addict. That was far from the case. She was a backup singer for the Rolling Stones. She toured with the Rolling Stones. She toured with the band. She was a lover of Levon Helm and Rick Danko. She lived with Gordon Lightfoot. She wrote songs with Gordon Lightfoot. Just to give you a fuller picture of Kathy Evelyn Smith, this is not the woman that the media depicted properly. Was she addicted to heroin? Yeah, she had a $25 a day habit for what it was worth. And she did become a drug dealer, as part of her lifestyle. However, there was more to her. She came out of Ottawa, another Canadian, and she was part of the scene back then that was on the rocks at the Roxy and the Chateau. And I think that her nickname was Silverbag because she had this silver bag she kept the drugs in, if I remember correctly. But there's a picture, obviously, weather worn from heroin. But nevertheless, she was a scapegoat, as Rondell points out, because the others will flip. Now, she will leave the chateau. This is after Robin shows up. This is after De Niro is doing drugs. She will, again, he had so many injection marks on his body. There were 4 to 5 from that night but she had injected him 24 times in the last 30 hours by her own admission. Now she's not doing this as a someone who's trying to hurt him. She's doing this because he's requesting her to do it, and she is doing it for Belushi, who would have gotten someone else to do it. She was called Kathy Silverbag Smith because of the silver bag she had. It was kind of interesting. I mean, she worked with Hoyt Axton and wrote songs with Hoyt Axton and drove his tour bus. I mean, her credentials in the rock world were very interesting. So anyway, when she leaves him, Belushi's sleeping. She orders room service. He's breathing and snoring. And she takes his car, as was appropriate at that time, which had happened before. She lived Bimini Place over here in Hollywood, if I recall. And she went home, took a shower, came back, And when she came back, Belushi was already dead. And they, had the ambulances outside. And this guy, Superfoot, showed up and was supposed to bring him a typewriter, the trainer, Wallace. And he showed up and found him in bed. And Bill Wallace, he found Belushi on his side in the bed, gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But he'd already passed, I think, about 3 hours. He was already dead for 3 or 4 hours. This was now, 12 o'clock, 12:45 in the afternoon. And this is March 5th, 1982 in Bungalow 3. So he goes in there, he's got the key, and he finds him there, and he tries to give him mouth-to-mouth to no avail. Obviously, he's gone. And then all hell breaks loose because they begin to try to cover it up. So Tom Mount and Sean Daniels, what do? They go to Belushi's office on the lot looking for drugs to get rid of. Kathy Evelyn Smith, before she left, took the syringes and spoons with her and cottons so the maid wouldn't get them. So she leaves with them. She comes back. She's arrested and handcuffed, taken over to Hollywood Division, where they go through her pocketbook and they find the needle and they find the spoon. And they said that she said she took them so the maid wouldn't get them. And the guy knows she's on probation for paraphernalia from literally a month before. She's already on probation. And he knows, this is the Hollywood Vice detective, he knows that she's a junkie and surprisingly lets her go, which I didn't really understand. But the rumors will begin to surface, and it's not a rumor that is that bizarre, that she was an informant for the LAPD narcotics division, which would make sense because she was a junkie who was a girl on the scene who had been busted. And in fact, if she wasn't an informant, I'd be surprised. Not that she was informing on Belushi, but this was common practice to keep them out of jail, to flip them to be informants. So, I mean, if she wasn't an informant, I would be surprised. But she's released that night by LAPD, and she will go back to Canada. She will later attempt to sell her story to the National Enquirer, which you just showed the cover of. And it's a really interesting scene because they're working on her. They're trying to get out of her the phrase on tape that I killed John Belushi, and she refuses to say it. And they wear her down. The editor from the writer for the National Enquirer admitted that they kept getting her drunk with themselves to get her to say this on tape. And checkbook journalism at its peak. I think they paid her about $15,000 to $20,000 for the story, which is a lot of money back then, even for the Enquirer, for her to say that she did that. Now, this gets the attention, obviously, of the LADA. But in the meantime, De Niro tells everyone not to cooperate with the police, and he flees back to New York because he's such a righteous dude. Robin Williams will be subpoenaed in the grand jury case against her, and he will cut a deal, Robin Williams, that he will testify against her if he doesn't get any questions from the grand jury about his own drug use. So that was kind of interesting how Robin Williams shows up to lower the boom on Kathy Evelyn Smith, who is in a lot of ways like the Rush shooting, the last person standing and the victim that had to go down. Yeah, total cesspool even back then. Just crazy how they tried to scapegoat this woman because it was such a celebrity death. I mean, even recently, Robert De Niro's grandson OD'd, and he forced New York City police to find the 3 people that sold the grandson the drugs and had them arrested. I mean, it's almost like they believe that these people they're like captives or kidnap victims forced to do drugs. It's just ridiculous. However, that being said, she will plead no contest, and she will end up doing about a year. She's sentenced to 36 months. I think she did about 18 months in jail and got out. And it was kind of hard time. And then she eventually went back to Canada. She died a couple of years ago. Actually, she lived a fairly long life. But that being said, I would be surprised if she wasn't a informant for LAPD. Now, why is that important? It's important because Judy Jacklin is so outraged about the death of her husband that she contacts Bob Woodward to write a book about her husband. And what she tells Bob Woodward is, I believe Kathy Evelyn Smith was an informant for the LAPD, and the LAPD killed my husband. It's one of those grieving widows. Now, Judy Jacklin is doing drugs, so she's not that stable. And she believes that LAPD murdered John Belushi. Okay. So she gets this guy, ironically, from Wheaton, Illinois, same town that Belushi and her grew up in. And Bob Woodward this is her memoir, by the way, Samurai Widow. This is in response to the book Wired. She ostensibly hires Bob Woodward because they worship Bob Woodward and they worship Carl Bernstein. They think Nixon is Hitler and that these two guys are their countercultural heroes. And, many times the sketches that they had, had Dan Aykroyd playing Nixon, and they worship Bob Woodward. So she tells Bob Woodward that she's willing to give him everything, her diaries, the contracts of John Belushi. She's willing to get on the phone. There's Woodward and Bernstein. She's willing to get on the phone and tell every single person that they know to cooperate with Bob Woodward, which she does. And she turns over every contract that John Belushi had, her diary entries of her own diaries. She contacts everyone and says, cooperate with Bob Woodward. And Bob Woodward goes out with the help of an assistant and literally gets everyone, without doing anything, to talk about John Belushi. And without any prompting, what everyone talks about is his drug abuse, without even being prompted, because they all were telling him how they did drugs with Belushi. And he documents every single conversation. It's in the book, the time he did the interviews, the date of the interviews, the content from his own notes of the interview. He is a fact-checking fanatic because he comes from journalism and not tabloid journalism, but the Washington Post. He'll be the managing editor of the Metropolitan section. And him and his assistant, I think his name was Scott Armstrong, talked to every single person, and everyone, to their credit, said that, I didn't lie to him. He just didn't get John Belushi. Nobody ever says that he made this up. There's nobody who says that. They're just angry as fuck that Bob Woodward held up a mirror, which he admitted doing, to Hollywood itself, and they did not like the image that they saw. And that includes everyone from Jack Nicholson on down to Dan Aykroyd. They did not want to read about this, but they freely told him, without any prompting, every piece of dirt that's in that book. And he challenged them to prove where he had made anything up. And in fact, he didn't. In fact, he was so fanatical, I guess he foresaw this, that he listed the detailed notes of every interview in the book, the dates and times and places of every interview. It's quite a piece of work. Not that I'm a fan of Bob Woodward, but you got to give credit where credit is due. This guy put out a book, and then they went to work on it. Everyone denouncing it when it came out goes immediately to the New York Times bestseller list. It is a fascinating read of a type of genre of book, of a Hollywood tell-all book that I think it came out in '84, that will later come out, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. There's a whole genre of these Hollywood tell-all books that are fascinating to read and well documented. They did not want to see in print what they had told him. They freely told him, according to Woodward, everything that's in that book, and they just did not like to read it. And he really, to his credit, Woodward said, this had to come to an end. All of these people were his enablers, is what Bob Woodward said. And that was absolutely true. Nobody, they were all making money off of John Belushi, and nobody would stop him from using drugs and alcohol. He could have been committed. He could have been done a 5150. Many ways to do this. You know, Aykroyd said there were no rehabs at that time in America. Well, in fact, there were 3,195 rehabs operating in the United States in 1978. The book itself is fascinating. And then what happens is the movie rights are sold. The movie rights to the book, which becomes Wired the movie, which is a whole separate documentary by itself. The book becomes the movie, and the casting of Belushi becomes this unknown actor named Michael Chiklis, who will later become famous for not The Wire, but he was I forget the name of the thing that he plays a cop on. Well, he'll also be in the Three Stooges movie, which is kind of funny. The situation with the movie, Michael Ovitz and Eisner and all these people put out word that nobody is going to be accepted who's in this movie. But there are stars in the movie itself, and they are all blacklisted. Michael Chiklis gets blacklisted. You want to talk about a Hollywood blacklist? Everyone, Rocco, who's in this movie, gets blacklisted. J.T. Walsh gets blacklisted. Michael Chiklis. I mean, it is insane what they did to these innocent actors who just wanted to work in a movie. They didn't give a shit about Belushi. It was just another acting job for them. But they tried to block this movie from coming out in every single way possible, not to salvage the reputation of Belushi, but to salvage their relations, to their reputations and their drug abuse. These people lied so much about trying to cover up this Belushi story that it was breathtaking. Real hypocrisy and cowardice on the part of these people. And look, I mean, I was around doing drugs at that time too, so I'm just, you know. But the cowardice and using their PR firms to try to destroy this movie was beyond anything I've ever seen. The movie is bizarre. Don't get me wrong; it's totally surreal. It's an art film. It's Belushi, you know, already dead, looking back at his life in the back of a cab, being driven around Hollywood, and I think it was Ray Starkey or someone who was driving him around. But yeah, I mean, the movie's surreal. I don't know what that photo is, but what is that? Oh, but nevertheless, they did everything they could to try to stop this. Now, to tell us about his drug misadventures, I think there's quite a few documented episodes on the other channel if you want to see my drug use. At one point, doing Liquid Acid with Dan Aykroyd, where Dan Aykroyd built an entire village at where I was at this thing with Dan Aykroyd. He built an entire village out of matchsticks. And I came downstairs, and there was Aykroyd, and we were both on Liquid Acid, but that's a story for another day. Yeah, so I mean, I partied with Judy Jacqueline. I'm not absolving myself by anyway, but I never met Belushi. I did know his wife, and obviously I had a thing with Aykroyd and Al Franken. Here is the gravesite of Martha's Vineyard. You know, they tried to fly the body back from LA, and it was a jet given to them, like a 10-seater by the studio, and his casket wouldn't fit in, so they took him out of the casket, and Bernie Brillstein had to fly with the body bag of John Belushi in this private jet all the way to Martha's Vineyard. And when the plane landed, they put his body in the body bag out on the wing, waiting for a forklift to come over and pick up the body bag. And the wind blew the bag open, and his head was sticking out under a full moon from the body bag. And he said it was one of the most gruesome things he ever saw, Bernie Brillstein, who, you know, Brillstein was one of the biggest enablers that he had, giving him money for drugs, and he damn well knew what it was going for, as everybody else did. Now, there's two things I wanted to talk about. One is there's Bill Murray putting a flower on the casket. This is at Martha's Vineyard, and Dan Aykroyd playing the 20,000-pound bee by the Ventures, a song they both agreed. It's an instrumental song by the guitar group, the Ventures. So, okay, so from the conspiracy point of view, I just want to say this, and you can make out of it what you want. There was a guy named Bob Woodward. Now, Bob Woodward, as we now know, was ONI. He was Office of Naval Intelligence. I covered that on the other channel with our Watergate series. Bob Woodward was ONI, came from the intelligence division of the Office of Naval Intelligence. Okay, we know that. Smokey Wendell, this other guy around him, was on the White House detail of the Secret Service. Blair Brown, the actress, from the film Continental Divide, her father was a bigwig at the CIA. And Kathy Evelyn Smith may or may not have been an informant for the LAPD. So you have these four groups circling around him: ONI, Secret Service, CIA, and LAPD. You can make out of it what you want. I just thought it was odd that these four groups are represented in this story. And you say, well, Mark, what could that possibly mean? Well, there was a guy named Robert Pearson, and I don't know if people remember Robert Pearson. Robert Pearson was a long-haired biker who became Abby Hoffman's bodyguard in Chicago during the DNC protests. When Abby was on trial for the Chicago 7, Robert Pearson showed up clean-shaven in a suit and tie, and Abby Hoffman's bodyguard turned out to be an undercover detective for the Chicago police. And he testified against Abby and the Chicago 7 in their trial in Chicago. That's why I mentioned these other four law enforcement agencies, because Pearson had infiltrated into the inner circle of Chicago 7. And, sure enough, clean shaven with short hair and a suit and tie, Abby was stunned to see Pearson on the witness stand as a undercover Chicago detective. Okay, so that's bizarre. And that was in 1968, 1969, and an event that Belushi happened to be at and get his head cracked open. You ruined it. I've been a fan of SNL. Now you tell me he caused some other kid to go fight in Vietnam. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about that. He did not want to fight in Vietnam. Now, that being said, the toga phenomenon sweeps the nation from Animal House, and that goes on for years and years and years. And I think in 1986, I was contacted by Tulane University to put on the world's largest toga party. Here's an actual flyer, 1987, from the event that we put on in at Loyola and Tulane, combination of both schools down in New Orleans. And we had Otis Day and the Knights, the actual band, and we made it for charity that you had to bring a can of food, which may or may not have been a mistake. But according to the Guinness Book of World Records, who was there at the time, it was the world's largest toga party ever put on. So I am responsible for that. And also being on stage with Otis Day and the Knights, doing the Worm. Also getting the key to the city from the Mayor Bartholomew of New Orleans. There's my key to the city of New Orleans. That was for putting on the world's largest toga party. We were living in a hotel with Otis Day and the Knights. They were down below us. We had a floor above them. We were brought to the shock jock radio, whoever that guy was, of New Orleans. We kicked him out of his studio and took over the radio live, started broadcasting in New Orleans with a lot of marching powder, as you people could imagine. We took over that station. The state police had to show up to get us out and off the air. We were on live on the air at that point, promoting the event, but nevertheless, the shock jock was not happy that we locked him out of his own studio. We then did the world's largest toga party. I remember we had some college guides, and I said, take us to whoever the Delta House is of this campus. And they took us to a house not unlike Animal House, run by a fraternity called the Deeks. And I went in there and I said, who are these pussies, the Deeks? And they came out with pool cues. And then they found out we were from Lampoon and we all bonded and had a good time. But yeah, even in 1987, this is like, like 9 years after Animal House, this was an explosion of fraternity memberships around the country, which I know I was never in a fraternity, so I was not hip to this, but it was quite an event when we went to New Orleans to put on the world's largest toga party. And I thought that maybe you people would get a kick out of hearing that part of the story. There's a lot more stories related to this, but I think that's probably going to cover it for today. If anybody has any questions, I'm trying to think if I left out anything that might be important to you guys. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, there's another one. Wow. Well, yeah, Otis Day and the Knights. It wasn't the Robert Cray band. Robert Cray is in the movie, by the way, playing an unplugged guitar in the club scene that you see. But it was his family. Like he had like a Sly and the Family Stone family band that toured with him, Otis Day. And they would eat on the road. They had these pots and pans they brought with them. I guess it was a low budget operation. They played a lot of gigs. That was their whole life, was to play these gigs. And great guy. I ended up, I can't get into it, but nevertheless, it was a wild, wild time. Robert Cray played bass. I don't know if he plays bass, but he's an incredible, brilliant blues guitar player. All right. Well, that was entertaining. I don't know if anybody got anything out of that. They enabled his behavior. Yeah, Roy, they really did. I mean, if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, Robert Cray Rundell, great blues person, big fan, Robert Cray band. I have albums just from Robert Cray that I still play. But if you'd like to subscribe, yeah, David surprised about his take on Woodward. Yeah, I should trash the book for reasons that I don't know. The book is absolutely accurate, and I'm sorry about Woodward. I'm not a fan of Woodward's, but you got to give due where credit is due. You can like and subscribe, hit the notifications. A pretty good show for Midwest Lee. I don't know, Midwest Lee's level of awards is very, very high. Let's see who this is. Oh, Pew Pew. Yeah, welcome back. These episodes are just getting better and better. Well, I think next week we're going to get into, or the week after, rather, we're either going to do Jonathan Winters. I think John Candy is next. I think I'm going to do John Candy and then do Jonathan Winters, then Chase. I'm not really sure about the order, but I think Candy is going to be next. I don't know why I do it in these particular orders, but there is some logic to this method, which I haven't figured out yet. Yeah, Jimmy goes on and has a career of his own. A perfectly good career for Jimmy Belushi. He probably tried the hardest to stop his brother, but to no avail. Yeah, it's funny that Bill Murray quote. He said he didn't say it was all lies. What Bill Murray said was, it's possible that Nixon was innocent based on Bob Woodward. They all said it was lies because it held up a mirror to their own drug abuse. All of the words are theirs. Nobody ever sued Bob Woodward. In fact, Judy Belushi tries to sue Bob Woodward because he inadvertently used one of the photos from her that she hadn't given permission for. So he writes her a letter saying, I apologize for using this one photo. And she goes, aha, I can sue him now. And she says, let's sue his ass. And she tries to sue Simon & Schuster, whoever it was. And they said, we'll give you a check for $500. She ended up getting like 25 grand out of them. But totally embittered woman. And she wrote her own memoir, and she had no way could she contradict anything that was in that book. All she kept saying was he didn't show the good side of John Belushi. And that's true. He does show the good side of John Belushi. However, she doesn't like the drug stories. And, that's on her for not having him committed. She had her own coke problems, her own drug problems. and that's on her, not on Bob Woodward. And all of these people covered their own asses, which is really sad. Really is sad. But it was a hard pill for her to swallow. Definitely, definitely. But Aykroyd came out afterwards at the end of the book, and he said, "I'm not going to be one of these anti-drug proselytizers. I'm going to continue to do drugs," which is what he said. Robin Williams said it scared him straight. That was a lie. Robin Williams will go to rehab a number of times after that. De Niro clammed up and disappeared. Christopher with the 5 memberships, I thank you. Mr. Ebden, that's really appreciated. I've got a product I want to tell you about here, which is this tribal coffee made by pygmies in Papua New Guinea. I just want to read this thing here, which I just found. We hope you enjoy our new coffee. The grinds are roasted here in Texas by the farmer family farm from Papua New Guinea. This is a customer of ours, the best coffee we've ever had. And I agree with that. In fact, if you use that 10% off code, you can, the Wired book was, you can't put it down. I highly recommend the book, but not as much as I recommend this coffee, because this coffee, somehow the beans are crushed with the feet of the little pygmies who are able to get into the vat using their tiny little feet and toes to crush the grounds into a incredible mountain coffee that's 100% Arabian. This is gold. I can tell you right now, folks, this here is gold. It is a delicious coffee. Let me just take a hit off of it. I would recommend you try one, as you could say with drugs also. But this coffee will turn your head around. There's an image of me over there on the right somehow. Your pygmy pony. Yeah, the typos are killing all of you. The script was rather weak for the book. For the movie. Yeah, it's not weak. It's an avant-garde film. Weak, I don't know if that applies, but the coffee is not weak. And with this secret 10% off code of Mark G, you could be holding this bag in your hand right now and beginning to cook this coffee like I just did. And I think you'll enjoy it. 2 great sponsors, Biltong and the coffee. We're going to be back on Wednesday with the history of show business, the week in history of show business, which I think I'm having a lot of fun doing that week of, because they're stories that are not connected, but they happen that week in show business history. Twish, this week in show business history. Twish. The cartoon looks like anime. It could be. It is, and I'm getting a small toenail. I found the last bag. Yeah, there are different things in there, but disregard that. The coffee works with the toenails. Without the pygmy operation, you would never have this great coffee. I hope, unless you have some other questions, get the book Wired. Christopher's right. The paperback blues, but you have hours of entertainment. Yeah, the history of week in show business. I like that. Wired will explain to you not just Belushi, but everyone around him. It will explain 70s show business culture, as is the book Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. That's my second favorite, well, actually my favorite Hollywood tell-all book. I mean, there's You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again, which is very interesting. But Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, that's fantastic, fantastic book. So is Wired. So is You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again, and a bunch of them. I think Peter Biskind wrote Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, which has a documentary about it that's now available with all these people in it, featured, Spielberg and Lucas and Paul Schrader. They're all in the book. Really, really, Scorsese's in there. Fantastic book, as is the Wired one. Okay, I got things to do. I hope you enjoyed this thing. How long was that? Was that enough time? It's all right. That's not bad. 2 hours. We'll be back next Wednesday for another exciting adventure of show business stories. I've got quite a few of them, so this channel may be going for for a while. All right, let's get out of here. Let's show the one more time the subscription logo, and there it is. Hit the like button, and also, if you want to put in the comments what your favorite Belushi sketch was on SNL, or your favorite Belushi movie. That could be fun to kick around also in the comment section after the show for people who want to do this or participate in it. So it'll be a lot of fun. Remember to like and subscribe, tell your friends, hit the notification button, and get all this stuff in back of me. There's all my Lampoon albums back there. And that Blues Brothers book is very good, by the way. The one you see over here. This book is very good. It's about him and Aykroyd. So really, really enjoy that book. So Summer Rental is one all the chugging. Okay. Anyway, okay. So have a great night. I'll see you on Wednesday.